Okay, good morning. What I'm going to be talking about is the baby steps that we're taking in terms of validating TrueAllele. We have just started with this. We have been coming to these the DNA Subcommittee meetings, going to various talks where Barry Loosman and Mark Rowan have been presenting the work that they have done. That got us very interested in Suffolk County proceeding with this. Thanks to an NIJ grant, we were able to get money to purchase TrueAllele ourselves and start validating it. Wasn't quite ready yet, but that's all right. One thing I want to point out on this slide, two things actually. First of all, something that happens on occasion when I'm involved with something, my name goes up there even though I'm the person who did the least amount of work on this. I would like to recognize the people who actually did the work that you're about to see. This would be the individuals at Cybergenetics, Mark, Aaron, Matt. I'm sure there were many others involved who I haven't met yet. And also the many individuals at the Suffolk County Crime Lab, virtually the entire biological sciences section was involved in the work that is being presented here. One thing that's missing, Mark had inserted the symbol of Suffolk County here. Unfortunately, your computer's not quite reading it. Anybody who's familiar with Suffolk County, the symbol of Suffolk County is a bull, which if you've ever dealt with Suffolk County is a very appropriate symbol. But it doesn't really represent the work that was done here. Okay, why were we interested in TrueAllele? A, we all hate mixtures. I think that's pretty much why everyone is trying to come up with new and better ways of interpreting them. So we had a few issues here. One is the issue of objectivity. It's been raised, the issue that analysts may go in with a level of bias, that they have the profiles of the known people involved in the case, and they're reviewing the mixture, knowing what the profiles are, and they're finding what they need to find. We have taken steps to eliminate bias, doing our human evaluation of mixtures. However, if you're using a computer-based system, you're totally eliminating the idea of bias because there's no way that the computer even knows what the profiles of the individuals involved in the case are prior to its interpreting the data. Mark has already discussed efficacy. What we're hoping to do is get better data from the results that we obtain in our cases. When we have mixtures, we are typically getting not that great statistics. We're using combined probability, and the numbers are nothing to write home about. And a lot of times, again, as has been mentioned earlier, because of the fact that we have alleles below threshold at certain loci, the numbers are not that great, even though there is a considerable amount of data in the mixture. And we're just missing that, and we're hoping to use TrueAllele to get that information and make use of it. Reproducibility, Mark has already mentioned about how many times TrueAllele reanalyzes the profile to come up with its ultimate conclusions about it, whereas in the Suffolk Crime Lab, our reproducibility involves having an analyst do their mixture interpretation, and then it gets second and third reviewed by other analysts. And if the reproducibility isn't there, we wind up with fistfights in between analysts trying to argue out what their interpretation should be. So having the computer take care of this is much better. And then inconclusive, a lot of our data, we will get mixture profiles where there's a major component that we're able to do some interpretation with, but there's an inconclusive minor component. And we're hoping to be able to get data from these minor components as well. And also with some of these really hairy mixtures, we have analysts who feel that we should just make it a lab policy that all mixtures are inconclusive, and we're trying to avoid that as a lab policy. What we did is, the start of our validation is we sent a number of mixture cases to Cybergenetics for them to analyze on TrueAllele. So these were all cases that were analyzed in the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory using our current procedures. A total of 67 cases were analyzed and were sent to Cybergenetics. And we didn't focus on any one particular type of case. We didn't focus on sex crimes. We didn't focus on property crimes. It's basically the types of cases that we routinely get at the Suffolk County Crime Lab. Many sexual assaults, about half of the cases that we sent out were sexual assault cases. A lot of property crimes. You can see there's a number of burglaries, larcenies, robberies, and then a number of other interesting types of cases mixed in, such as assaults, arsons, and so on. Out of the 67 cases, there was a total of 122 items of evidence where there was data that we had analyzed and then that cytogenetics analyzed as part of the study. When we total up these samples, 87 of the profiles were mixtures of 2 contributors. There was 32 samples where it was a mixture of 3 contributors, and then another 3 samples which were 4 contributor mixtures. So it was approximately 2 samples per case that were sent. But a lot of the cases just had 1 sample, and there were some cases with 4 or 5 samples. What were we comparing? We were comparing our human review to the computer review done using the TrueAllele system. When we do a human review of mixtures, we basically have 3 possible outcomes of that. One is we can use random match probability. If there's a major component we can determine is single source. We do random match probability on that. We do combined probability on minor components or any other unresolvable mixtures where we can't separate out a single source major component. And then our least favorite, which is inconclusive, where the data is below threshold and we can't report it out. Computer review, the same data was taken and analyzed using TrueAllele software at cytogenetics, analyzing to determine probabilistic genotypes using the TrueAllele system, and likelihood ratios were obtained for each of these cases. Okay, what was involved here? Okay, first of all, what was done as part of the study, all of our data was then transformed into likelihood ratio for comparison purposes. So we report out combined probability as numbers such as 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million, and so on, and that was converted to likelihood ratio so that we could easily compare our results to what TrueAllele obtained. And again, we were comparing the efficacy of our crawling system to that of TrueAllele to see is there an improvement as we would expect with the computer-based system, and then also seeing how reproducible the system is. Is it getting the same results through all of its reanalysis of the data? And this is one of the cases that we sent out, a typical major minor component mixture, and what we were focusing on here is the minor component, which appears to be a 1012, but there was some other issues with this case, so we came up with our interpretation of this data and then sent it to TrueAllele, and this is what they produced. First of all, they did the mixture rate and determined how much was the major component, how much was the minor component. And it was roughly a 74-26 split between the two. So this is the minor component data here. I was asked earlier how long this talk was going to go. And I want to mention to Jack that when we were putting this talk together, when I was discussing this with Mark mentioned that this one slide he could spend at least half an hour talking about, if I remember right.
Which I did an hour ago already.
Right. So, not to worry. I realize there's planes and trains to catch, so I'm not going to spend half an hour on this slide, but this is basically reiterating what we have seen before, and this is the data from the same case. And what TrueAllele is doing is comparing every possible outcome for the result that we saw in the earlier slide. And it's determined that the probability is about 75% that this profile is a 10-12. We came up with lower probabilities for a 9-12, 11-12. The cutoff here was set at 95%, just as the data you saw from York State was done as well. The likelihood ratio for this was determined by taking the probability of about 75% and taking the statistics for this particular profile, which was approximately 5%, and dividing the probability by the statistics, and we come up with a likelihood ratio of 15 for this particular locus. What TrueAllele then does is it repeats this for every locus that we test. So each of these bars indicates the likelihood ratio for each locus. When we see blue, that's happy because that's a positive likelihood ratio. If we see red, it's negative. And here we're seeing the likelihood ratio is blue for every locus that was tested for this particular mixture. And what we wound up with by totaling up all the data from every locus that was tested, we came up with a joint log likelihood ratio of 17.68. So extremely useful data.
What's the center column? Q1, S1, R3.
Oh, okay, but let's see. Q1 is the that particular sample.
Those are labels referring to a different part of the sentence. You want to double check which exact genotype. Okay. Question 1, suspect 1, random 1.
Right. In this case, it's pretty simple because we're only dealing with one known sample for comparison purposes. Okay, this slide is not totally correct, but when this case was reported out, it was reported that based on our analysis of it, that the data was consistent with the suspect and no stat was applied. The reason why is that this particular sample was a swab of the suspect's hand. So what we were actually looking for was the victim. So in this particular case, there was no stats done, but it's not that stats couldn't have been done in this case. However, in looking at the data, if we had come up with a statistical analysis of this, it wasn't going to be anywhere near what we were able to get with TrueAllele, which was 478 quadrillion times more likely that it was the suspect. This is a small portion of all of the data that was analyzed in cytogenetics. What we're focusing on here are 52 samples where they were able to get a match between a known suspect profile that was submitted in the case and the evidence in the case. And what we've done here in this chart is we've broken this down based on the results that we obtained in Suffolk County using the human methods of analyzing this data. Uninformative means that we were not able to arrive at a conclusion for that particular sample. So more than half of these samples where TrueAllele was able to get a result matching the suspect, we were not able to make any conclusion. So there was a lot of data here that we were able to gain. This batch here, there were 5 samples where the stats for Suffolk County were less than 1 in 1,000. Another 7 that were less than 1 in a million, 3 that were less than 1 in a billion, and then there were 10 where we had stats greater than 1 in a billion. What we have here is the efficacy using the TrueAllele system. So this was the average of the likelihood ratio obtained for each of these samples in this particular grouping. Over here is our results from the crime laboratory. And you can see over here we had no data. And the numbers are not so great here as well until we get to the ones where we basically were using random match probability because it was a single source major component. The last column where it says the difference shows the increased amount of data that we were able to obtain using the TrueAllele system. This is the same cases. Again, there were 52 cases, 45 of which we were able to report out some kind of conclusion based on our analysis of these mixtures using our human methods. So what this data is showing is the 25 cases we did get results. The axis here is showing the statistics, so this is 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, and so on. So we can see, even though we got data, a lot of this data, the stats are nothing to write home about. Now, in the next slide, we now add in here the data obtained by TrueAllele analyzing the same samples. First of all, what jumps out at you is the first 27 cases where TrueAllele has data that we were not able to obtain. And then second of all, over here, where we did obtain results, typically TrueAllele has gotten better data than or better statistics than what we were able to obtain through our analysis methods. What was interesting in looking at this is that the data for TrueAllele, the likelihood ratios increase, and then there's a drop-off over here. And there's actually some samples here where we obtained some results, and TrueAllele's likelihood ratios aren't as good as some of the data over here where we obtained no results. And we haven't had a chance to take a close look at each one of these cases, but what we're presuming is happening here is that some of these cases were just crappy data, but just enough that we could get something out of it that we could report, whereas some of these cases here, the data was better, but due to our constraints about not being able to report out stats because there's a particular peak that's below a threshold, we were unable to use what was really good data. And TrueAllele is allowing us to do that. So our very early on validation, we've checked through this, and so far it is meeting and exceeding what we hoped. It was clearly an objective way of looking at the evidence. The data, as you've seen, we're getting much better statistics. It is reproducible. I'm sorry I glossed over that on an earlier slide, but the data showed that the results were reproducible from TrueAllele, and we're losing a lot of inconclusives that we had earlier. So where does that put us now? Well, we only last month had TrueAllele installed in the Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. As I mentioned, all of this analysis using TrueAllele was done at Cybergenetics. So last month we had the system installed. A couple of the cybergenetics folks came out, spent 3 full days training our entire section how to use it. And what we're going to do is do a redo of this data. We're going to reanalyze our data ourselves using TrueAllele to show that we've learned how to use the system, that our results are going to come out the same as what they produce in their analysis. And right now, even as I speak, there's someone sitting at our computer entering one of these cases. If they're not, I'm going to go through that later on. But the whole idea is that we want everyone to stay fresh with this since we just learned it and we have the computer and the software available. I want everyone jumping on the instrument as frequently as they can to stay current with it. That's it. Thank you, Joe.